like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get enough.
Right. Let's dive into this whole thing with Caitlin Clark.
Yeah.
It's pretty fascinating where sports and like race and all the media commentary kind of come together.
It's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, so we're going to unpack all this buzz around Caitlin Clark, her thoughts on privilege, especially in the WNBA, which is, predominantly a black league.
Right.
And, of course, Megyn Kelly's response.
Yeah, I think a good place to start is just acknowledging that this isn't just about, a couple sound bites or quotes that have gone viral.
Right.
This is really a window into a much bigger conversation.
Exactly.
About, female athletes, how they manage expectations, how we as a society think about privilege and merit.
Yeah.
And then, the role that media commentators play in shaping those narratives.
Yeah, and how those commentators like Megyn Kelly, what they bring to the table as well.
For sure.
So let's start with Caitlin Clark.
Okay.
I mean, this woman is on fire, Times Athlete of the Year.
Yeah.
She won the All-Star and Rookie of the Year awards in 2024.
Uh-huh.
And now she's going to be starting the 2025 season with the Fever.
Yep.
Coached by the incredible Stephanie White.
Can't wait to see what she does.
Right. But, it's not just about her skills on the court. It's also her authenticity, how outspoken she is,
Yeah.
That's what's landed her in the middle of this whole media frenzy.
Exactly. And that's where this Time interview gets really interesting, right? She doesn't shy away from these conversations about her white privilege.
Right.
But at the same time, she emphasizes that, she's earned her achievements.
Uh-huh.
What's so interesting to me is how she manages to, acknowledge the systemic advantages that she has.
Right.
Without undermining all the hard work and dedication and talent that she's put in.
Exactly. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah.
How do you sort of acknowledge your privilege without minimizing the work that you've put in?
Yeah, and it's privilege can open doors for you, right? But it's still up to the individual to walk through those doors and to really make the most of the opportunities that are presented to them.
Exactly.
And it's clear that she has,
Oh, yeah.
She's put in the work.
Absolutely. And one thing that really stood out to me in that Time interview was when she specifically mentioned Maya Moore.
Oh, yeah.
As her favorite player growing up.
Love Maya Moore.
Oh, she's incredible. And it just highlighted how the league, its history is built on the contributions of these incredible black women.
Absolutely.
And you can tell that she admires their talent and understands their legacy.
Yeah, and that statement, mentioning Maya Moore, it really is significant, I think, because it speaks to a much broader societal discussion that we're having.
Totally.
About how we think about privilege and merit.
Right.
And, can you recognize the advantages that you have that are unearned without saying that other people who haven't had those advantages haven't worked hard or don't deserve their success?
Yeah, it's a very fine line.
It is. It's a real tightrope walk.
It is.
And I think Clark trying to navigate that's sparked some really strong reactions.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that leads us to Megyn Kelly.
Oh, boy.
Because she did not hold back.
No, she did not.
It was like she was just waiting for this moment.
I know.
So she basically accused Clark of apologizing for being white.
Yeah.
And called her comments condescending, fake, transparent, and sad.
Yeah, and then she went even further. Right?
Oh, yeah.
She used that term self-flagellation, which really frames Clark as this person who's, overly apologetic or even putting herself down just for being white.
Yeah.
And that's a really interesting choice of words, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very deliberate.
It isn't. It's revealing, right? Because framing this acknowledgement of privilege as self-flagellation, that taps into this idea that, recognizing your advantages is somehow a sign of weakness rather than a sign of awareness and empathy. It's almost like a way to shut down the conversation.
Exactly. As soon as you say that, it's like, well, I don't want to be weak, so I'm not going to acknowledge anything.
I think it's a tactic that's often used to just completely derail any conversations about systemic inequalities.
Yeah, and I think it's important to consider Kelly's background here.
Oh, for sure.
Because she's coming from that cable news world.
Yeah, where
controversy sells.
Exactly. Controversy equals views, right?
Ratings, yeah.
Engagement,
yeah.
So it's not surprising that she would frame Clark's comments in a way that would, provoke debate or even outrage.
Right.
It kind of aligns with the style that she's cultivated over her career.
Yeah, she's got a brand.
She does, yeah.
Yeah, this is it.
Exactly. So this whole situation, it really raises a question for all of us, right?
Yeah.
How much does the background, the platform of a commentator influence how they shape these really sensitive and complex narratives?
That's a great question.
It's something we all need to think about as we try to unpack the impact of their words.
For sure, because words have power.
They do.
So how did Caitlin Clark respond to this very public critique from Kelly?
Yeah, what did she say?
She basically said that she's focusing on the people who are closest to her and blocking out the noise.
Okay, that makes sense.
She emphasized, being comfortable in her own skin, and she wants to use her platform to elevate the WNBA and all of its players.
I mean, good for her, It's like she's not letting this negativity bring her down.
Right, she's rising above it.
Yeah, and you know what I think is really interesting?
What's that?
Is how her response is almost like a complete contrast to Kelly's approach.
Right.
It's emphasizing the importance of staying true to your values, your intentions, especially when you're facing criticism on these really complex and sensitive issues.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's such an important message, especially for young athletes who are looking up to her.
Oh, absolutely. It's a reminder that you can't please everyone, especially when you're dealing with these really polarizing topics, right?
Totally.
And sometimes the best way to handle that is to just stay focused on your own moral compass.
Yeah.
And the opinions of those people that you really trust.
People who know you best.
Exactly, your inner circle.
Yes, and this whole thing highlights just how different people approach these conversations. Right? You have Kelly, who's very confrontational.
Right.
And then you have Clark, who's more focused, more internal.
Yeah.
And neither approach is necessarily right or wrong.
Right. They're just different.
They're just different. But understanding those differences, it helps us understand their perspective and the impact of their words.
Absolutely.
And as we move forward, I think it's crucial to think about the long-term implications of these kinds of exchanges.
Yeah.
For the WNBA.
And through the league, for women's sports in general.
Exactly, because the WNBA is growing, right? Yeah. It's gaining popularity, it's getting more attention.
And that inevitably means a more complex and potentially more scrutinizing media landscape.
Yeah, so they have to be ready for that.
For sure.
And they have to learn how to navigate that.
Exactly.
And that's where I think Caitlin Clark's story becomes even more compelling.
How so?
Because she's not just a phenomenal athlete.
Yeah.
But she's evolving into a cultural figure who's willing to engage with these important topics.
She is.
And whether you agree with her or not, she's definitely starting conversations that need to be had.
Absolutely.
And that's valuable in itself.
It is. And you know what's so interesting about all of this?
What's that?
Is that, Clark being willing to speak up about all this stuff about race and privilege.
Right.
It raises a really important question for all of us.
Yeah.
How do we as a society engage in these conversations about race and privilege?
In a way that's
constructively?
Yeah, constructive, respectful.
Especially because they can become so emotionally charged.
Totally, because I think sometimes people are afraid to even enter the conversation.
Right.
Because they're afraid of saying the wrong thing.
And of being attacked. Right. Like we saw with Megyn Kelly.
Exactly. So that's the challenge, right? It's not about finding the easy answers or like silencing anyone who has a different opinion.
Right.
It's about understanding that.
It's an ongoing dialogue, and we need to approach it with nuance, empathy, respect.
Yeah. All of that good stuff.
And I think, Clark's decision to just like block out the noise, that's really interesting to me in this context.
Yeah.
Because it suggests that while it is important to be aware.
To be aware of the criticism,
Right, and the different perspectives that are out there.
Yeah.
It's equally important to prioritize your own values.
Right.
And surround yourself with people who get it.
Yeah.
People who understand and support your intentions.
Exactly. Because you're never going to be able to please everyone.
Especially when you're talking about...
Especially with these kinds of topics.
These hot button issues.
Yeah.
So sometimes the best way to handle it is to just stay focused.
Stay grounded.
On your own moral compass.
Exactly.
And on the opinions of those that you trust.
The people you know have your best interests at heart.
Yeah, your tribe.
Exactly.
And, we can't talk about this without talking about the WNBA.
Oh, yeah.
Because the league has always been at the forefront of conversations around,
Social justice?
Yeah, race, gender, equality.
Yeah, always pushing the boundaries.
Always. And as it continues to grow in popularity...
It's only going to get more attention.
Right, which is great, but it also means...
More scrutiny.
More scrutiny, more of a complex media landscape.
For sure.
More opinions.
Right, and potentially more pushback, like what we saw with Megyn Kelly.
Exactly, that's what I was thinking about. It's like they're going to have to be prepared for that.
They are, but I think they're ready.
I think so, too. I think the league is ready to have these conversations.
Yeah, and to really be a force for positive change.
Exactly. Think about it. The WNBA is becoming this cultural force.
It is.
And the players are becoming these voices on really important social issues.
They are.
And that's why Caitlin Clark's story is so fascinating to me.
It is.
Because she's not just this incredibly talented athlete.
Yeah.
She's now this prominent figure who's willing to engage in these really critical conversations.
Yes, and whether you agree with her stance or not, she's definitely sparking dialogue.
Absolutely, and that's valuable.
It is.
And you know what? There's another perspective here that we haven't really talked about yet.
Okay, I'm interested.
Someone who has this really deep understanding of both the game itself and these complexities of race in America.
Okay.
And I'm talking about Stephanie White.
Oh. The Fever's new head coach.
Exactly. As a Black woman, a former WNBA player, and now a coach, her perspective adds a whole other layer.
I love that.
To this whole conversation.
To this whole thing, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and what I find so fascinating about her perspective is that it's not about, just agreeing or disagreeing with Clark or Kelly.
Right.
She brings something totally new to the table.
Totally different.
She encourages us to think about the role of allyship, the importance of listening to Black women's voices, and the need for this continued dialogue and education.
It's a really powerful perspective.
It is. It's a lot to unpack. Okay, so let's get into Coach White's perspective then.
Okay.
One of the things she really emphasized was how important it is for white athletes like Clark to actually use their platform to advocate for equality, and speak out against racism.
Right.
It's not enough to just be aware of it.
Exactly. You have to do something.
Yeah, you got to take action and use your influence to actually make a difference.
Yeah, and you know what she even did? She drew this parallel to the NBA.
Oh, really?
Where coaches like Steve Kerr and Greg Popovich, they've been very vocal about social justice issues.
Yeah, they have.
And I think that comparison is really interesting because it highlights that, these conversations about race in sports, they're happening everywhere.
Yeah, they're not going away.
Across different sports, at all levels of the game.
Totally. It's not just a player issue.
Right.
It's a collective responsibility.
It is, and it's about creating a culture.
Yeah.
Where everyone, the players, the coaches, the executives, everybody feels empowered to speak up and to work towards creating a more just and equitable environment.
I love that. And that brings us to another point that White brought up.
Okay.
Which is the importance of actually listening to and learning from Black players.
This is so important.
It is. And she was saying that white athletes really need to engage in those conversations that might be uncomfortable.
Right.
And educate themselves, about the history and the impact of racism and understand
to understand
the experiences of their Black teammates.
Yes, because it's about going beyond just performative allyship.
Totally.
And actually taking concrete steps
Yeah.
to challenge your own biases.
To look inward.
And amplify those marginalized voices.
Yeah. And you know, Coach White's perspective on all of this is just a really powerful reminder.
It is.
That true allyship is a journey.
Yeah, it's not a destination.
Right. It requires constant learning and reflecting and action.
Absolutely.
And it's important to note that she wasn't saying that white voices should be silenced.
Right.
Or that anyone should feel guilty.
It wasn't about guilt. It was about responsibility.
Exactly. Her message was about creating a space where everyone feels comfortable.
Safe,
comfortable. Yeah. To speak up and work together to make a real difference.
And that brings us back to that bigger conversation, right?
Yeah. How do we navigate these complex issues?
We've talked about Clark's comments, Kelly's reaction, and now White's perspective.
Right. And it's so clear that there's not
one right answer.
One right answer or one-size-fits-all approach.
Nope.
To these kinds of conversations.
But I think what we can learn from this deep dive
is
just how crucial that continuous dialogue is.
It is. It's about listening.
Listening to different viewpoints.
Yeah.
Being willing to challenge your own assumptions.
To be wrong.
Yeah, and understanding that these conversations They're ongoing.
They're not going away.
And they require empathy and education and action.
And as our listeners continue to think about this whole thing, just remember, it's okay to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's part of the process.
And to question your own understanding and to really embrace those opportunities to learn and grow from these conversations.
Because they're important.
They are, even when they're tough.
Even when they're difficult.
So that's where we'll leave you today.
Okay.
How can you contribute to these conversations in your own life in a meaningful way?
It's a question we should all be asking ourselves.
Yeah. How can you use your own platform, whether it's at home, at work, in your community, to really advocate for a more just and equitable world?
It's up to all of us to make a difference.
That's right. Food for thought.
Food for thought.
Sound the alarm. I'm coming up. We'll have a ball. I'm sweet like a buttercup. You're Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get enough.